We have launched.
There you go. There you go.
Launched, we say.
That may have been an imposter.
It takes two of us to make up for Chad's absence.
Launched, I say.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Planet Green Trees. Hope you can hear us. We are rolling without the chattiest tonight, so all engineering problems tonight can be blamed on who's going to take the blame? Jeff? No, just kidding. All right, so this is officially episode number 216. Wow, we're calling it local, state, and federal menagerie. I did look up the word menagerie, and it is appropriately used in this sentence the way that I did. It means mixing of animals. But
right.
The call number, of course, is 1-347-326-9626. PlanetGreenTrees.com is the website. I'm your host, Michael Comorn from Comorn Law, and maybe for the first time in 216 episodes, Chad is not here. He is not in trouble.
Spiritually, he's here, though.
And he will be arriving shortly. I understand he's got a date with the U.S. Postman. And but nevertheless, when he does get here, he will be his certain he will be the normal, funny, and entertaining sidekick that he plays here.
We should get him to enroll in the Locks for Love program and take that beard off. What do you think, then?
Or continue to grow it for money.
Even better, yes. A ZZ Top kind of thing.
We're looking for some new ideas for the show. We're going to start with that one and see if we move in any other directions.
It's radio, so now people can picture what he looks like.
That's right. 4'4". How tall is he? Little man.
4'7".
Right. All right. So also, if you couldn't tell, one of the other contributors directly right here is Rick Thompson from the Compassion Chronicles. He's also our news editor. Rick, welcome.
Resident smartass as well.
There you go. And Jamie Lowell, the esteemed producer. Unknown, but whereabouts unknown, but I understand coming to the show and we'll be here.
Riding a horse to get here, by the way.
That's right. And maybe Federspiel will be right behind him.
Oh, that'd be great. Although you don't ever want to be chased by a cop on a horse.
That's right. I want to thank Jamie, of course, because in all of our 216 episodes, he's been able as producer to bring to the show for fill it with great guests and timely, informative information. Also, back again, our secret musical talent that you got to hang around to the very end of the show to get, but we may try to intertwine a little bit more as some of the ideas are fostering for Better Planet Green Trees. Jeff Frazier, everybody, Attorney Jeff Frazier, working in Michigan and kicking ass and talking a lot of task forces, which we're going to come back to later. But about tonight's show, it's episode 216, Local, State, and Federal Menagerie. We have a number of outstanding guests. The first one is Mike Lazurski, Policy Director of Americans for Safe Access. He works with patients and advocates and elected officials at the state, local, and national level to create new laws and improve existing ones that allow patients to have safe access to medical cannabis therapy. Do we know where he's? Is he in Ohio or something?
No, Mike is based out of...
He's been on the show before.
Yep, Mike is based out of Colorado.
That's right. Okay. We're going to talk to him. We're excited about that. He's going to be on shortly. Tim Beck, we like to call him the godfather of marijuana in Michigan. He's going to be on to discuss the what I describe as the runaway momentum of the decriminalization and legalization movement in Michigan through the ballot initiative in recent years. Him and Chuck Ream of Safe Mich Coalition have led that charge for our local cities, but we've got some hiccups for the first time really ever this year. There's been a couple bumps, some challenges to the petitions filed in Utica, Grosse Pointe, and Montrose, and elsewhere, and we're going to be addressing some of those topics. I'm glad to have our good friend Eric Gunnels, Thetford Township trustee, text him at 810. Just kidding. He, of course, is what I like to describe as evidence that activism and involvement in social issues can not only turn into a position as an elected official, but also help bring about change. Eric has been very vocal as a people's candidate in Thetford, and I see great things for him, and he's going to weigh in on the Montrose situation, what's going on there with the challenge to the petitions that were filed. Also, returning, good friend, rock star, cannabis warrior, attorney brethren, who I like to call the professor from his interesting points of view on this crazy ride that the attorneys who have dared to try to figure out the Medical Marijuana Act in Michigan. He, of course, bailed and went to California, which makes sense. But he's doing much more complex cases, and one of the cases that is remaining in Michigan is a federal indictment of a number of medical marijuana patients and caregivers, where in some areas they call that a good network of patients and caregivers. In the Western District Federal Court system, they call that a RICO, or continuing criminal enterprise, or other aiding and abetting conspiracy charges, and very, very difficult to defend. You know, the Western Michigan has been more proactive at prosecuting patients and caregivers and dragging them into the federal system than the Eastern District has, and this is an example of that. Just a total tragedy. A lot of people that really have very little, if any, involvement getting sucked into a web of who knows what. But regardless of that, John Tergas, the great lawyer, is going to take care of them. But he filed an interesting motion dealing with presenting and addressing the medical marijuana issue. I'm not even doing it justice right now. I'm going to save it for when he gets on the air so we can explain a little bit more. All right, so that's the show. We're going to get. I'm going to rant in a minute here. We're going to come back after the break, and then we're going to get right into it with Mike Liszewski. All right, so there's always so much to talk about, and every day there seemingly is new information, new topics, which kind of make it challenging but also exciting to talk about these things. I'm going to talk about what I've had on the brain, and my colleague Jeff Frazier had on the brain, and it's called drug task forces. And if they weren't on your brain before, more people have recognized it as being, you know, images of what these drug task forces are because of the Missouri Ferguson situation, where regardless of what side of the fence you're on, whether you think it's a racial incident or not, where you're arguing from, you saw a overly militarized group of police officers that were acting as if there was a, you know, gave the appearance of a military occupation. Well, that thing wasn't gotten together in moments immediately after that. That was stocked and in the arsenal of cities, and we've learned in studies and reports and have come out from them. Like, what are, you know, the story, the second and third storyline, trending news topics after Ferguson was, what are those tanks doing there, and what do the other cities have, and how is that happening? And Oakland County has grenade launchers, and oh, here's Saginaw that has a military tank. And as if you want some good entertainment, listen to the Sheriff Federspiel, Planet Green Trees, I think it's episode 2, last week, 2014 maybe, and where he discusses and really defends how, I think he didn't like being humiliated, I think, by the John Oliver show, and ultimately returned the tank. But it's consistent with the way that he views things, which is very unique to what I'm talking about, which are drug task forces. And in my field of, I'm finding myself doing most of the cases of medical marijuana, it is these agencies that are handling the medical marijuana cases. It's not the city attorneys. It's not the, you know, I mean, it's the prosecutor's office, but they assign their special drug force prosecutors, and the investigations are done or brought to them by these net teams and drug task forces. And as Jeff and I pontificate and analyze these tragedies in a very, you know, esoteric way, in the sense that we see it, I hear it, it's driven me, it's given me, as a lawyer and in fighting, it's inspired me to try to right some of the wrongs that have happened. And I know Jeff feels the same way, that, you know, took on Thule, Texas, and shut down their task force, and the Hearn case also in northern Texas. And it's not like, you know, they always say, you know, divorce cases, when husbands and wives, after being married for 20 years, they get into court and they're miserable to each other, and they're complaining to the judge and complaining to their lawyers of how awful the other person is. And, you know, the joke amongst, you know, the non-detached is like, what, you just woke up yesterday and realized that they were a bad person? I mean, you've been living for 20 years, you know what I mean? Like, it's now you're just complaining about it. So we've known about it. They've been around. They've been handling these kind of cases, the drug task forces. And as, you know, we address some of the, trying to get more interesting or more novel but meaningful arguments together, just common sense and logic, we've fallen upon a couple that we're going to talk about right now. And Jeff is responsible for most of this, and I think it's important issues to sort of get out and to talk about, and hopefully as we begin to utilize them in our briefs, and maybe the courts will begin to look upon things differently. And before I get to the real issue, which I'm going to call the separation of powers, I want to just mention, an often overlooked aspect of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act is that in the declaration section where Michigan voters declare that modern science, as outlined in the National Institute of Science Studies, that cannabis is in fact medicine and can treat a number of different diseases, including chronic pain. All right. So you got to understand that I would argue it like this. This is not a legislatively created law. This is 3.3 million people, more votes than any other vote ever in the history of Michigan, declaring unequivocally. And to undeclare it, you would need a 75% vote, which is not the type of vote you need to undo any of the other laws or amend any of the laws. But for this vote, and this law, it is special. It's bigger, longer, uncut. That's a South Park reference, by the way. And the point is that it is a big deal, and it should not be scoffed at, as it often is. And the declarations aspect of it is critical because it is outlining exactly what it is. In fact, in the Tierbeck case, the next section they rely upon in how they describe and come to the conclusion that there is notice given the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act that it's still legal federally, and therefore the states can coexist with their medical marijuana law with the federal government. And they rely upon that section taking a lot of meaning to the point where they're deciding whether or not preemption exists. It's a pretty powerful aspect, and I think too often overlooked is that declaration. And sticking it in the courts and the legislature's faces, they've got something other than a Schedule I drug, and every single statute, every single jury instruction, all the crimes under the Public Health Code are based upon the theory that cannabis is a Schedule I drug. So if it's not, and people have declared it, what is it? Okay, that's the beginning. I guess I got to talk about the section. I think so, because I still want to get to the stuff. All right. The other side of it is this: a lot of people don't think about this, but the Senate Bill 660 was declared into law. Yes, there's a piece of it that requires before it can begin its startup and beginning. There's conditions that must happen. That is that the federal government must either reschedule cannabis to Schedule II, or they have to give some kind of authorization. But unequivocally, by creating Section 8 of the Public Health Code and the declared language within that part of the health code, they say unequivocally that marijuana is a Schedule II drug. They also say that marijuana, under the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, should no longer be considered within the Public Health Code. And if that happens, and that's where it goes, then marijuana is not in the Public Health Code anymore. It's something else. Tomato.
It's a tea.
It's a tea. All right. Now on to separation of powers. The problem is that this is bad for those drug task forces because I've described them in the past as the prehistoric animals that are foreshadowing, having dreams or nightmares that they're going to become extinct in their last gasp to try to remain alive and procreate and keep their is to go around and smash and grab and take up whatever they can, because in a little while they're going to be off the planet. And they know it, and it's a sense of desperation. And it's a real manipulation. I could tell a lot of stories. The most awful is about these officers in Chesterfield Township, these detectives who are luring patients and caregivers off of Craigslist into parking lots and with fake cards and making purchases. And I'm not advising anyone to do that. But I remember a detective saying something to the effect of, Mike, I'm 52 years old and I'm retiring in 6 months. I've had a lot of really, really difficult, cases, and now my life's easy. I come to work and I get on the internet, and I am at the gym same time every day. I've never been in better shape. I was here now. Several months later, he's no longer there. He's retired. So it's really, really penal. But the point that I want to make is that these agencies are driven by their forfeiture proceeds. That their forfeiture proceeds are then met by federal grants, Byrne JAG grants, which were created for two reasons. One, it came out of the political era of when drug trafficking of cartels and cocaine in the early 80s, the Reagan era and all of that. And the imagery at the time, at least for our culture, was that a six-shooter police officer by himself would go into a room and there'd be these drug cartels with AK-47s, and it was those kind of images which I think drove this part of the militarization of our police forces, and the intention was that these cartels are engaging in federally outlawed activity, and therefore the federal government is giving resources to these agencies, these special forces, to police against the same types of crimes that the federal government does. That was the premise. The problem is that in Michigan, the crimes of prosecuting for marijuana are no longer crimes as they were under federal law in Michigan. So the question becomes, is the funding still valid? But even more so, the concept that the net teams are driving their budget for the following year by their own forfeiture proceeds is very problematic. And a simple three branches of government analysis. We all know that the legislature controls the purse strings. They write the checks, they write the budgets. Any administrative agency that is paid by a government is determined by a legislative body of government, as opposed to the executive branch or the judiciary branch. The money that is allotted to the state police or other agencies that are in need, or whatever the budget is, or the local police departments that are fed their budget, comes from millages from the city that is directed by the city council, voting on salaries, cutting officers. I've been at those meetings. I remember, and again, I'm sidetracking a little bit, somewhere in where was it, Allen Park, Lincoln Park. I remember being at a one of those times when they were opposing the Medical Marijuana Act. They're trying to do a moratorium. There's a bunch of patients and caregivers that were there speaking out against it. I was there, support of some people. During the same city council meeting, the police officers who had taken pay cuts, worked more hours, less time with their family. Like 3 or 4 of them were getting cut from the salary, and they were all PO'd. So you had an interesting dynamic of who was protesting against the city council, and that's the way it goes sometimes. And it was such a simple solution, stop arresting them, let them develop businesses, they pay some of this stuff, create some. And it was. But here you go. So when you have a body of government acting as a governmental body, using the authority that comes with the being of a law enforcement official, and you are self-funding yourself, this is a problem. And the problem is that it violates the concepts of due process and separation of powers, because the setup of the government is not to let agencies fund themselves and then be met by that. That is like, as Jeff found, and you would never think that this could ever happen in a courtroom or in a judicial. So what year was it? Put him on the spot. 1999. We're not even talking like 1906. But the case was one where a magistrate was hired, as they are. They're not elected officials. They're hired by the chief judge to, be on call to sign affidavits, sign search warrants when affidavits are presented. The arrangement they had with this particular magistrate was that he got paid per warrant that he signed, not paid for the warrants that he rejected. This is a Supreme Court case in Michigan. And clearly that is a violation of the separation of powers. I mean,
wow, that's terrible.
Judiciary would be funding themselves then and incentivized and, really affecting, as if it needs to be said, the, appearance of impropriety, the neutral and detached. Although I read a transcript today on a bind-over on a case where the preliminary exam judge was the same judge who signed the search warrant. And when I argued about the bind-over, he made a comment like, well, when we executed the search warrant at your house, counsel, we kind of not neutral and detached. But I've digressed, but I think I can wrap it up right there. I think I've gotten it all off my chest for right now. Did I miss anything, Jeff? You want anything?
No, you nailed it. It's, I would address again everybody, looking at Ferguson saying, oh, my goodness, when did this happen? Well, it happened a long time ago. You really want to know when the police in the United States began to be remilitarized, and I'll say remilitarized because it was the militarized police with red coats that we fought against from the very beginning. But Nixon did declare the war in '72, Controlled Substances Act, but it was Reagan, Bush 1 that made the fundamental change, which was the amendment of the Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act as a law makes it a criminal action for the military to be used as a police force, and they made an exception that ate the rule. They made an exception to the Posse Comitatus Act that allowed the military to be used as a police force in a war on drugs. And that's how we got to Ferguson, and it was a long, ugly road in between. And fortunately, in many of these states, like the great state of Michigan, the people, and in some cases the legislatures, have moved to say this plant is not in and of itself evil. There are reasons, legitimate and legal reasons, to have it. Some of our criminal procedure needs to catch up with that, because if something is not contraband for all purposes, well, then its mere presence cannot be the basis for probable cause that a crime is being committed. And that's a bunch of the stuff that we've been working on and continue to work on. But, yeah, you nailed it, Hoss.
I'll add that Chesterfield Township, of course, has a history of wickedness. Myself being caught up in that situation with Big Daddy's when they sued us as a nuisance to shut down our distribution center there. The Attorney General had to join in on that case. The Attorney General, he who shall not be named, because Eric Smith, the Macomb County prosecutor, refused to join the township against us on that. So there's a history of that particular township being a little rebellious and against the norm when it comes to actions of that nature.
I'll tell you one more real quick thing, too, as I dive into the jurisprudence in Michigan. It's an amazing state, and as Michigan goes, I think very, very well may go the country, just because of the unique history of Michigan. I think talking about the Sinclair case, it occurred to Michael and I that, you know, what do you look at for precedent when all of a sudden the state courts and the state laws are now differing and they're dissimilar to local laws? Well, we can go back to look at what the courts, both the U.S. and state Supreme Courts, were saying back then. I'd like to just quote a few lines from our Michigan Supreme Court, in the case of John Sinclair, obviously one of the veterans and the leaders of this from way, way back. And this is a quote from the United States, from the Michigan Supreme Court, talking about the rationality of the state's marijuana laws, and it held that the comparison of the effects of marijuana use on both the individual and society with the effects of other drug use demonstrates not only that there is no rational basis for classifying marijuana with the hard narcotics, but also that there is not even a rational basis for treating marijuana as more dangerous than alcohol. This is a Michigan Supreme Court in 1972. So this is where it needs to go. These roving, militarized, self-funding, federally funded paramilitary task forces that are going in and forfeiting people's property and busting into people's basements and homes need to be doing that upon a showing that there is clear evidence of a crime being committed, and that's not the case at the moment.
I love it. Just imagine if, like, the smell of marijuana all of a sudden was no longer contraband. You know, oh my God, I smell marijuana. That's probable cause that there's something really evil going on, because the nature of cannabis, as we've come to know it or accepted it to be in our laws, is that it's illegal per se. That's the point.
So they'd have to do like real police work, you know.
Right.
You know, in Alaska, it's not. It's not evidence of crime in Alaska. God bless.
We got to take a break. Jamie's here now, so we're on the clock. And I just want to point out it was Jeff.
Jamie's here now, so we're on the clock.
Jeff was the one that may have caused any delays, not me. Do you understand that, Jamie? Jamie, so welcome back, Jamie. We've got, please call in 347-326-9626. I do, as we go to break, want to give a couple of shout-outs to my dear friends, Pam and Dewey Thomas, who have been just so wonderful to the Comorn family and all the things that you do, and I really appreciate all the love. And Mishpacha, I taught Dewey some Yiddish or Hebrew. All right, Bob Redden, warrior, cannabis warrior, and really the tragedy that he had to go through and the recent loss of Tori Clark, his beloved. Wishing our best to Bob. You know, some unmentioned that we forget all the time. My friend and, you know, unfortunate client for a period of time, Brian Vaughn, who was a film of being dragged through the Oakland County court system.
What a shame that was.
Sal Agro and Barb Agro. Sal, of course, passed away shortly after. Barb is still kicking strong, I know that, but they dragged her through some terrible, terrible times. And, of course, cases that are not over in my world, and the entire John Roberts Cannabis Cancer Project and all the hard work that those gentlemen do. A shout out to Gersh and Monkey Paw, and I sound like I'm doing a cartoon now, and of course John Roberts. And I know that they've had some very difficult times. It's very challenging to be able to get the cannabis to these patients when they're getting into the program, and the oil and the quantities that are necessary to make good quality oil. I just wanted to give you guys a shout out and acknowledge all your hard work and send out some good vibes to the our loved ones.
John may actually be trying to call in this evening. He has some great news about the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department, as well as an announcement about an event in support of the Cannabis Cancer Project. So we might hear from him later on in the broadcast.
Excellent. I do see some calls in the queue, and I do see our guest, Mike from ASA. We're going to be right back with you, Mike. Hang tight. We'll take a quick break and be right back. This is Planet Green Trees. Call numbers 1 through 4.